Paul Skenes is the #1 pitching prospect in baseball. Let's do a breakdown of his pitch shapes and how he attacks hitters. Skenes throws 5 pitches: a four-seam fastball, slider, changeup, curveball, and a splitter, which is a splitter-sinker hybrid that he calls a Splinker. His usage to righties this year at AAA has been around 40% four-seam. His primary breaker is the slider. The splitter is just below 20% usage, and he throws the occasional 0-0 curveball. I think one of the sneakiest things about him as a pitcher is that when he has less than 2 strikes, he actually lowers his fastball usage and leans more on his slider and that splitter. And then as he progresses to 2 strikes, he'll toggle back up the fastball usage to around 50%. To lefties, he throws more four-seam, and then he mixes in his slider, changeup, and splitter all below 20% each. He does the same thing in terms of increasing fastball usage as he gets ahead in the count versus lefties. It's just a bit less noticeable because he's throwing the fastball more than half the time in either situation. Skenes' release height is right around the average for a major league pitcher, which in his case is actually an advantage. I say that because he's huge, 6'6", 235, throwing from nearly a full sidearm slot. Generally, sidearm pitchers have lower release heights. Think about Luis Castillo or Chris Sale, but because Skenes is not a massive extender down the mound, and he's tall, that sidearm slot results in what release height says is average, but I think creates some visual advantage for him against hitters. It's an average release, but his body is getting to that average release in a more non-standard way. He also moves on the rubber based on the handedness of hitter that he's facing. I did another video about this that I'll link to above, so I won't get into too much detail on this here, but I think he's trying to pick up an advantage in how his ball approaches the zone by moving towards the first base side against righties and the third base side against lefties. It could also be a command thing for him. There really aren't a lot of other pitchers in baseball that do this. It's just another wrinkle in who he is as a pitcher that makes him really unique. Anybody who likes baseball and has ever been online has probably heard the trolls say that Paul Skenes' fastball shape is bad. My hot take is that they're not actually wrong, but his shape doesn't really matter. I like thinking of fastballs in regards to a few variables if you're trying to grade out a pitch independent of results: velocity, release, movement, and location. I think that gets you like 70% of the way towards understanding how good you expect a fastball to be. If one of those variables is poor, you probably have to make up for it by focusing on another variable. For Skenes, I'd categorize his fastball as such: elite velocity, elite release because of how he moves on the rubber and him being a tall sidearm pitcher. He's got plus command, and I'll agree with the trolls in saying it's below average shape, but I'm talking raw shape here, purely what the vertical and horizontal movement are, independent of literally anything else. You give me 2 elite variables and a plus variable on the spectrum of mine, and I don't really care what that last variable is. The bad fastball shape argument is just missing the forest for the trees. Skenes' fastball averages 100 miles per hour. Yes, 100 miles per hour. It has 13 inches of vertical break and 14 inches of horizontal break, which is dead zone, yes, but he's a sidearm thrower. Unless you're Josh Hader, you're not really going to get vertical on your four-seam from that low of a slot. To righties, he's pounding up away with the pitch plus glove side command, which is often hard to do for a pitcher that holds this level of velocity. To lefties, he's a bit more mixed in his location. There doesn't seem to be a deliberate approach here based on count, so my guess is that he's probably trying to go up away with it most often, and he has some glove side misses mix in that pull him to the inner third of the plate. Despite some more variation in his lefty fastball location, the pitch is actually missing more bats versus lefties than righties. This is an elite fastball. I'd argue it's plus primarily due to the angles he creates, so better than all but 3% of Major League four-seam fastballs inside the 97th percentile. His slider is also pretty great. It's 87 miles per hour with 8 inches of vertical break and 6 to 7 inches of sweep on average. But as you can see on a pitch plot, there's a pretty good amount of variation in this offering that takes it anywhere from 90 miles per hour with no horizontal to 85 miles per hour with 14 inches of horizontal. The main thing you see between handedness with this slider is that he gets away from the harder cutter-style shape versus lefties, where it's a bit more common versus righties. Back in college, Skenes threw a big sweeper that averaged 10 inches of sweep, and he didn't really have this harder slider variation around 90 miles per hour. I heard in an interview with Just Baseball's Jack McMullen that he basically plays with the pitch, but it's all the same grip, which is great info because when he came into Pro Ball last year, to me it seemed like he had a new, harder slider compared to the college sweeper he had, and he was actually throwing that shorter cutter shape more than the sweeper. which seemed crazy to me because that bigger shape was just so good in college. This season, it seems like he's lengthened the pitch back out, and he appears to go to that harder, shorter shape only when he kind of needs it. This pitch is a bit tough to evaluate from a stuff perspective because it has this variation, so the average movement isn't totally representative of what it can be on any given pitch. He generates around a 50% swing miss on this pitch, which is 20 points above the average slider in the major leagues. I have this as a plus slider. I think there's an argument that it's plus, but I would say that has to do more with how it interacts with the fastball and his command of the pitch rather than just the raw shape itself being plus, especially when considering angles. To lefties, he's going backdoor with the slider with his far third base side of the rubber placement. And to righties, he's done a really good job keeping this pitch away, missing the heart of the zone. The slider-fastball interaction on the outer third of the plate is pretty sublime, but you'll notice he does stay away from right-handed hitters a lot of the time, which brings me to the pitch that I think is an absolute game changer for him, his Splinker. A Splinker, to me, is just a splitter-sinker hybrid. We're calling it this because it's harder than a splitter. It also drops more than a splitter, and it's not totally a sinker because it has a lower spin rate, it's thrown harder, and because of that lower spin rate, it's dropping more. So it's somewhere wedged in between those two. If you don't like that name, you could just call it a really hard splitter. I think that's totally fair. It's achieved by not totally splitting the ball like you would for a fork or what a lot of guys throw in their standard splitters. It's also not like a standard sinker grip where your fingers are more together. You're going almost in between those two. Skenes throws his here on the ball, and that splitting your fingers allows you to kill some spin and orient the axis of the ball such that it picks up more drop, but because your fingers are still on the ball applying force and you're not offsetting that force with a pure split grip, you're able to throw it really hard. Most of the guys who throw one, like the Twins' Joan Duran or the Angels' Jose Soriano, seem to have some variation in their grip. I showed you Skenes, which you could also see right here. Joan Duran is slightly different orientation, maybe closer fingers, but similar general idea, I would say. And then Jose Soriano seems to be totally off the seams, almost more like a true split here. But again, he's not wedging the ball between his fingers, which allows you, I think, to throw the pitch harder and part more force on the ball. You just don't see this much drop on pitches above 94 miles per hour usually from any of these guys' releases. My hot take is that this pitch might be the best pitch in Paul Skenes' mix. We haven't seen many balls on play with it this season, but he didn't allow a fly ball on it through his first 4 starts. He's able to get it in zone about 55%, which is well above average for a splitter and slightly below average for a sinker. It sits nicely at the bottom of the zone to both lefties and righties. It's a unique pitch in his mix. It gives him something down, hopefully more inside to right-handed hitters. It's a ground ball pitch that could get some whiffs. I just love this pitch overall. It's a plus offering to me. His other 2 pitches are more peripheral, so I'll combine them together. His changeup, which is solely a left-handed pitch for him, and his curveball, which is almost exclusively used in early count situations. The changeup is 88 miles per hour, and through his first 3 starts this season, a hitter actually didn't make contact with the pitch when they swung, which is almost unfathomable. There's a lot of velocity separation here alongside some drop separation from the four-seam fastball he throws. He keeps it down away. I think the changeup itself is probably above average on raw shape, and then again playing up due to results and angle. His curveball is 84 miles per hour with negative 3 inches vertical break and 7 inches of sweep. This is almost like a second slider to me. He's just so east-west as a pitcher that he's not really going to create a vertical shape unless he's popping up out of his slot, which I don't really think is a good idea. So this is kind of the result. It's a good pitch, probably more average to above. And the reality is that he's just telling us he kind of doesn't need this pitch based on the usage almost being solely an early count offering. One of the reasons I think Skenes is so good, apart from the velocity and shapes, is that his command for his velocity is pretty spectacular, particularly to right-handed hitters. He's really able to keep things away from them, as I pointed out earlier with that fastball slider interaction. Most of the time you see high velo pitchers, they just don't really know where the ball is going. Jose Soriano from the Angels, who I mentioned, also throws a Splinker as an example of this. It's pretty inconsistent command for him, which isn't surprising from the simple premise that as you move faster, it's probably hard to control those finite body movements that have an influence on where the ball is located. To some extent, Skenes reminds me of DeGrom. The thing that always stood out to me about DeGrom was his command for his velocity, but the mix here between the two is pretty different. DeGrom was more of a carry four-seam guy from a low release who picked apart hitters and could dot at will, really focused on 2 pitches. Skenes doesn't have that same feel, particularly to left-handed hitters, and he's much more of an east-west guy, I would say. But again, this is kind of picking nits. It's still plus command, and he's a really good pitcher. And that concept of great command for the velocity band he sits in is really what stands out. Skenes Stuff grades out well per Stuff models, but I think they're underselling him a bit and not fully capturing how some of the angles he creates and the release he throws from influence how his ball plays, which is fine. I'm not sure if it's even a Stuff model's job to do that. The more you bake into a Stuff model, the more ambiguous and blobby it could get. I kind of almost prefer something that just tells me what we think of the raw shape of the pitch, and then I could back into the angle stuff based on the results and the visuals. Stuff models have Skenes with 4 near plus pitches and 1 average pitch in his curveball. The velo is driving a lot of the grades here, which again is totally fine. I think the fastball and Splinker, as I said, are plus plus. The slider to me is plus. And then the curveball and changeup are probably more average to above average. This is an elite 5-pitch mix with command. It's really impressive. If we were to project Skenes right now over 150 innings pitch sample, I think he's like a 3.3 to 3.5 ERA pitcher. Now, before you freak out, that's really, really good, especially for a young arm. There's only 16 pitchers in baseball who qualified last year with an ERA below 3.5. There was only 5 pitchers who qualified with an ERA below 3. So right off the bat, at his age right now, I'm saying that he's basically an ace. And that projection for me going forward is more of a mean, I would say. This season, I think he's like a 3.3 to 3.5 guy. As he progresses in his major league career, I wouldn't really be surprised at all to see a season or two where he's sub 3 in ERA over a really large sample, which would probably win him a Cy Young. And maybe we run into situations where he's more like a 3.7, 3.8 guy, which is still above average, but doesn't really land him maybe in the top 20 or so pitchers in baseball. There's variance in this stuff, right? Development isn't linear. I'm fascinated to see how his stuff's going to play. He's a premium talent, premium velocity. I really think it's important to stress how much the angles help him out as a pitcher. I'm beyond hyped to see him in the major leagues. The Pirates got a good one here. I want your thoughts on Skenes, though. Drop them in the comments. I'll be down there. Any questions, as always, thanks for watching.